Today we're talking with Dr. Evan Stout, co-owner at the Family Vision Clinic of Mississippi. Dr. Stout, thanks so much for taking some time out of your busy day to join me.
Yes, thank you, Eric. I appreciate the invitation and happy to talk to you and looking forward to the conversation.
Yeah, you bet. So we were just talking about a relatively recent change for you in terms of moving from the associate level up to practice ownership. And so tell us a little bit about that and your experience of how you got into it, maybe some challenges or interesting things you found along the way.
Sure, yeah, it's definitely an interesting process for sure, moving from associateship into ownership for sure. I've been in practice for about 12 years. I came out of the UAB School of Optometry in 2012 and did a military scholarship through optometry schools. I was active duty military for 3 years after graduation, and then 2015 started back with Family Vision Clinic here in Mississippi. And so from 2015 to late 22, I was an associate in the practice and just worked, in the practice, seeing patients and helping to build the practice from there. January of 23, I actually purchased into the practice and became a partner. And we've been going, through that process for the last year and a half or so, I guess now. So it's been a good transition for sure. It hasn't been without its surprises and, and frustrations, I suppose, but all good things for sure. So we've been pretty fortunate and blessed to be able to be in this position. I'd say probably the hardest part is just getting all from the transitioning from associate to owner is just making sure that you have all the numbers right. It can be a very daunting process to actually come up with a valuation for a practice. And there's a lot of services out there in that regard, but making sure that you're going through the process in a fair way to the owner and the potential owner and the associate, and making sure all parties are, I think, represented and have a fair shake coming up with a deal that works for all. And so that process was certainly long and daunting. It took probably good part of a year and a half to 2 years to really get all the aspects down, I suppose. But once we're to that level, it's been a great transition. Fortunately, my partner is a good person. I know you could run into some bad people in pretty much every business, but it's been very pleasant working with them through that process. So it's been a good transition. Just kind of getting into more of the ownership role and having more responsibility and say in what happens in our business is a pretty exciting thing. It can be very daunting as well, but it's very exciting to be sure.
Sure. And even though, you mentioned it being daunting, and I know it's only been, 2.5 years or so since you actually completed that process?
About a year and a half. Yeah.
Oh, a year and a half. Oh, yeah. Sorry. A year and a half.
The whole process, though, you're right. Yeah, we did, start, well in advance of that. So it's not like it just happened overnight. Once we started, It took a good year or so to get all the, wrinkles ironed out, so to speak.
Sure. Okay. Looking back at that, though, you say it's all worth it?
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's been a great transition. I guess the hardest part from an associate perspective is just finding the right fit for you and fit for I guess your goals and your dreams for what you want your career to be. But identifying those goals and dreams are probably the most important thing, I think, in the early stages anyway. Finding your passions and what you want to do with your career and there's a lot of different ways an optometric career can go. There's a lot of different specialties. There's many ways you can take that, and finding your passion, kind of the why of what you do is definitely most important. And if you can find a practice that lines up with that, that's definitely a win. So it's definitely been worth it for me, for sure.
Right.
I'd do it all again for sure if I had to.
So. Good deal. Okay. Very good. I was expecting that to be the answer, by the way. So,
sure.
But I was glad to hear. Good to hear that. Yeah. I mean, look, some level of business ownership is just not right for everybody, right? And so once you get into it, I think you brought up an interesting point about having growth plans, just because I didn't really. I mean, I've thought obviously about growth plans and big goals, a number of years out into the future and things. I was talking to somebody on this, I think it was an interview here not that long ago, who was saying that the goal setting process is super important, especially because we revisit that through several phases of our life and different stages of our life, right? And so once you get to a point where, everything in a professional practice has been in a professional career has been very laid out, right? Like you go to school, you get this accomplishment. This is the next thing I need to knock down. You succeed and do it. And then you get to some point where not everything's so laid out for you anymore, right? And so
Yeah,
we
it
kind
becomes
of
less and less clear.
yeah, exactly. So you got to
Yeah.
spend quite a bit more time in reflecting on like, what do you want your life to look like? What do you want the practice to look like? And how do you want that to impact your community, whether that's your local community, the world, the industry? It could be a combination of all those things. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think for many of us it is. Obviously we're all local in our own communities, and some of us, are in big communities, some of us in small. We're a relatively rural practice.
Hmm.
We're in central Mississippi, but we're not near a big town necessarily. So we're in most of our locations, which we have three of. There's not much else around there. So being local and involved in the community is very important. But we also have this mindset towards growing optometry and advancing the profession, and advocating for both local optometry and on a national level as well. Certainly growth mindset and growth setting or goal setting, excuse me, is a big part of that for sure. So, kind of defining, like I said, your passion, number one, what you want your career to look like. And then, how do we get to that point? And I think, that is the hard part for sure. Because like you said, everything is early career is very well laid out. We've got to go do this to get to this level. And, you have to do the training to get to where you're at.
Mhm.
When you get to, I guess, ownership and practice and looking down the road at, once you're in practice is, kind of what do we want our practice to look like? And, not just on a local level, but I think nationally as well. That's definitely, the growth plan has to be there for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. You're talking about advocacy there just a moment ago. And I know you've had some wins at I think at a state level. You were telling me about scope expansion in your state and maybe some other things. Talk to us a little bit
Yeah.
about that.
Yeah, so there's Mississippi, recently went through our scope expansion in 21. Our bill was passed and we implemented that year. But so we're a few years into having expanded scope of practice in Mississippi. And part of that's laser procedures like YAG, lumps and bumps removals, that sort of thing. And implementing that into practice has been truly rewarding, especially to be somewhere in, like I said, we're relatively rural practice. And when you have all these patients around in your area that you're no longer having to send to an hour and a half away to have care that you could otherwise provide, it's a big win for our patient base for sure. But
Mhm.
so Mississippi's been through that recently. There's a lot of other states who've gone through similar battles legislatively with scope expansion in some other areas. But scope has certainly been a big one for Mississippi. And of course, we have other goals too, but that has been certainly a big benefit to our patients, and also just helping to grow the business of the practice as well. More things that we can provide for our patients, more services that we can provide. And we try to be as comprehensive as possible, being in rural settings. You don't want to have to refer out for a whole lot. Those patients have to travel sometimes an hour or 2 hours to get to the kind of care that you should be able to offer in the office. So we try to be as comprehensive with that as possible. But yeah, that scope win was certainly a big one for our patients. And we're very thankful for all the work that went into that, which it was considerable. There were some people that put a lot of blood, sweat, and tears into those efforts, and we're very thankful for that.
Yeah, that's great. Well, and so you've got that, and then you were mentioning to me during our pre-chat too about these. I don't know if you'd say it. I would say kind of annoying bills that keep popping up in certain jurisdictions about the what can be defined as a doctor, and having some being in a position to be able to advocate for the industry and kind of try and I guess fight those down or stave them off for
Yeah, and it
another
certainly
year.
takes being ready for sure. And you
Mhm.
can ask some Florida ODs. You should try to get somebody from Florida for sure. They've had probably the worst time of it couple of years in a row where those bills have been very aggressive.
Mhm.
But yeah, not a doctor bills is what we call those. But they've popped up in several states, and unfortunately, it's just a battle that we're going to have to continue to fight, I think. But yeah, there's these bills that pop up, and the main goal, I think, is to define medicine and define surgery, define physician. There's a lot of those languages in there, in those bills that don't necessarily say optometry can't call themselves doctors, but it can be interpreted that way. And
Mhm.
certainly, any bill that has the potential to take us backwards, we want to be vigilant and opposing, and just make sure that we're securing the language that we have now. And optometry has been a doctoral profession for as long as it's been around, just about, and we're not
Mhm.
eager to change that. So, those folks who have been through optometry school and have been Dr. Stout or Dr. whoever for their entire career shouldn't have to be turning around and turning the clock back. So So yeah, we're very paying attention to those sorts of things. Fortunately, Mississippi hasn't been directly targeted on that at this point,
Mm.
but there are a lot of states who have, like I mentioned, Florida has had several of those in the past year or so, that a couple of years that have popped up. And, we definitely have to be on the lookout for them because they, may not necessarily be ill intentioned, but they have the ability or the I guess openness to be interpreted as such. We definitely have to.
Yeah. Yeah, I think just like you're saying, staying on top of those things and being at the ready to
Yeah,
advocate for why maybe there's something else. I don't know. I've heard about them. I would say I'm not
sure.
like overly educated on all the
Yeah.
nuances that are going into it, right? But
Yeah. And there
um,
certainly are a lot of nuances for sure. And fortunately, most states at this point have good teams that keep eyes on these sort of things. And
yeah,
Mississippi, we have a legislative team. I'm the chair of our legislative committee at this point for the Mississippi Optometric Association. We do, and we have good people that pay attention to these sorts of things. It's not going underneath the radar necessarily, but
mhm.
they can pop up in some kind of unexpected places, and bills that seemingly don't have anything to do with optometry or other professions for that matter have, in a lot of cases, they can be so open ended, but it has the
No.
potential to affect other areas and apart from what the bill actually intends.
I think that's one of the more annoying things about our legislative process is just these bills that like get things piggybacked onto them that are completely out of the off base, right? So we're talking about this, whatever it is, but and all the focus is on this, and then we're going to piggyback
Yeah,
like a handful of other issues that we want on there, so that when
yeah,
I don't know. It's
but
halftime's a political game, right? Because like if they piggyback those on there and it gets shot down, then somebody could say political positioning, right? Somebody could say, "Oh, you voted down this thing." Well, no, it's because they not necessarily. It's because there's a whole bunch of other stuff tied to that bill that I didn't really support. So, but anyways, I digress. I think it is an annoying part of our of the process that goes on there. It's frustrating. But getting back into so that's great, by the way. I totally commend you and everybody that takes that level of action and commitment to further advocacy in their own profession for these different things, these different issues. That is great. Being the voice of the industry almost in that particular position, you as a collective are the voice for it. So that's awesome. I'll pause there for just a second because it looks like your video stalled. Can you still hear me, Evan? No. Mm. All right. Let's see. Just gonna give that a little bit of time to see if you come back. Well, shoot. Hey, we're back. Can you hear me? Oh, I can't hear you yet. There we go. Seems to be coming.
can you hear me now?
Oh, there you are. Yep.
Sorry, I don't know what happened. Not sure if our internet went out or something, but it didn't seem to. So I'm not really sure.
Yeah, that's right. I
Um,
was just talking and then I looked over and you were frozen. So
yeah,
yeah, I don't know. One of us is having internet
yeah, I had you in mid
connection.
conversation.
Okay.
It's
All
pretty
right.
interesting.
I might
Um,
remove this other one here so you're only in there once. And there we go. All right. So yeah, the part that you didn't hear, so
okay.
we can go back on track, is just I was talking about commending you for your advocacy and all the people involved collectively as being like the voice for the industry. And
Yeah, certainly it's very rewarding to do that, I think. Like I said, when you find out your passion and your why and you get behind those kind of things, it's becomes something you want to fight for.
mhm.
I think there's a lot of us in that ballpark that really want to advance the profession and just keep it moving forward. If we don't move forward, at some point there's somebody can move out and take us backwards. So we definitely don't want that
Yeah,
to happen.
right.
Just being on the I guess the front end of that or be proactive.
Yeah, yeah. Always a good thing. Always a great place to be. I know we're running short on time, but I did want to circle back real quick. So with your transitioning over the last couple of years, year and a half or so, um, into practice ownership, into co-ownership. And we always talk or hear about this kind of adage or cliche it's almost become where we try to, as the owners, we need to spend some time working on the business instead of just in it all the time. And has that been a challenge for you as you've
Oh, yeah,
gained your
for
ownership
sure.
status?
For sure, it's always a challenge. Finding time out of the clinic is very difficult. Fortunately, like I said, we have 3 locations. We're 4 doctors total, and fortunately, if one of us does step out, I suppose there's people to fill that gap. But that's becoming harder and harder. The busier we get, it's just hard to fill those times in the clinic when you need to be out of it. So it's always a scheduling issue, and it can definitely be hard to work out sometimes. My partner is very much on the kind of the backside of his career. He's nowhere near retirement, fortunately. He's definitely more less in clinic and more on the business, so to speak. Of course, he's involved in a lot of advocacy efforts as well. So he's very involved in the American Optometric Association. And so that takes a lot of his time and advocating for the profession and working on the business is traditionally been more his role, and then mine was more in the business and actually seeing patients. And those roles have started to fall apart a little bit. We've definitely had to spend more time kind of transition to the on the business aspect. We're in the process of hiring an associate, so that will help out with kind of my ability scheduling to be able to pursue more of those things that we need to pursue on the business. Hopefully that will come to fruition soon. We have some things in the works on that, but hopefully we'll see some improvement on that. But yeah, it's definitely always a conflict as far as trying to work out the logistics of who's in the business and who's on it for sure. And like I said, having the other doctors there definitely helps for sure. There's 2 owners, but there's 4 of us, doctors, and we definitely can work out some of those scheduling issues. Are probably easier than some can.
Sure. Yeah, but it's still a challenge. It's still one of those things that you have to really be intentional about and just carve the time into your schedule in some fashion, right? Because otherwise, like I live and die by my calendar. It's just if it's not on there, it's not. It's all the same things that you hear people say about it. It's definitely true, right? If it's not on my calendar, it's not getting done. And if I don't set aside time for it, that time gets filled up with something else, and
Absolutely.
that may or may not be on my agenda or aligned with my own goals, right? So usually they are, but sometimes some things can creep in there. And then so we keep just putting those kind of business development issues on the back burner until we can make the time to get around to it.
Right. Yeah, and I think that's a good point about that time getting filled up with other things that may not necessarily be the things you want to pursue or the things that align with your goals or your values. Like I said, if you're not proactive in filling those with stuff that aligns with those goals or kind of furthers you toward that end result that you want, a lot of times that time just gets filled up. It's going to get taken by something. And I think it's incumbent upon us to really make sure that it's something that actually furthers our goals or furthers our progression.
Yeah,
So it can definitely be a battle for sure, but yeah, you definitely have to schedule that time. If you're not going to be, in the business, you need to be on the business. Then you need to actually make sure that you're carving out that time, like you said. Very good point.
I think there's also, I know when I was really young in my career of business ownership, and I would look and I'd hear those same things, right? And got to spend time working on it. And like, yeah, yeah. And you look at like the bigger firms or in your case practices and think, well, gosh, if I had more employees and more partners and that's like this would become easier, right? It's like not necessarily the case, not necessarily
Yeah,
true that it becomes easy because you're just gonna more people and more balls in the air. You're just gonna keep filling it with that time with different stuff, right? I think it's really
absolutely.
important to have your goals aligned with that first, because then it gives that time that you're looking to carve out on your calendar, make a lot bigger effort to get that done.
Sure. Yeah, not like you said earlier, in the episode, it's all about finding your passion, your why for what you're doing. And yeah, if you don't have that defined, it can be very easy to fill, time and space and effort with a whole bunch of things that don't necessarily matter. So having that figured out, and then of course that growth plan, like we talked about as well, is definitely something you got to do. You got to know where you're going, and if you don't have a plan for that, you're going to go somewhere. Might as well go where you want to go. If you don't
Exactly.
define that, it's very difficult. You're going to wind up in a place, but it may not necessarily be where you want to be.
Yeah, exactly. Very good. All right, sir. Well, Evan, I really appreciate your time again, and thanks for coming here and sharing this bits of wisdom with us. Kind of in closing on this, is there one, and maybe you've already said it, is something you'd want to restate or expand on, but is there just a piece of advice you'd give others on their journey in independent optometry? that you've
Yeah,
learned throughout your
I
career?
think we've already kind of said it, but yeah, just your passion, your why for doing what you're doing. I think those are two of the things that need to be defined first before you do really anything.
Mm.
But then having that plan going forward, I think all those are very good points. And I think the last thing I'd really say, I guess, if there's somewhere you'd like to see the practice of optometry going, that may be something that your state's trying to go for, like scope expansion or something along those lines. There's nobody out there that's just going to make this happen. It's really incumbent upon the members of each state and us as individuals to really get out there and do the work and make the connections to make things happen. Advocating for the profession is something I think we all need to be minded. And unfortunately, not many of us are minded in that direction at this point. So we really need to be proactive in getting out there. And they said, if there's a goal that you want to see optometry become, you're the one that's going to make it happen. So get involved with your state associations and just make sure you're being the effort. We're going somewhere. We want to go where we want to go as an organization and as a profession. And I think just getting behind the efforts that are either already there or starting the efforts if we need to.
Very good. Well, again, thanks so much, Evan. I really enjoyed
Yeah.
our conversation, and I hope our paths cross again soon someday.
Yeah,
This was
thanks,
great.
Eric. Be happy. Thank you for the invitation and the connection. Appreciate it.
You're very welcome. All right. Have a good one.
Good one.